Okay, that took forever to get correct. Quite a while for me to get that all correct and up there, but I've got it. And let's get going. I switched a couple things around. And if you saw, the title said we're going to talk about universal traits, but no, we're not going to. That sounds like a philosophical classroom topic to me. And that's where we moved it to. We're going to keep talking today about we left off talking about personality traits and personality and health. And now I want to keep moving in that direction to tell you what is it that you need to develop in order to be a healthy person. Now, there's the 40 developmental assets that I'm going to talk about, but also I would like you to go to day 33, our philosophical classroom discussion, where we have begun a discussion on what are called adaptive mental mechanisms. And it blends so closely with this classroom right now and what we're talking about. What I'm doing in that class is I'm trying to teach you about groupthink. In our philosophical classroom, I'm trying to teach you about groupthink and the dangers of group thinking, and then how do we get out of it. Now, here's the thing about this classroom and this critical thinking classroom. I'm talking mostly to around high school aged students, all right? And so when we are talking about developing assets or mental mechanisms or any of these things that we're talking about, when I talk about it in a philosophical way, I'm talking about it so that we could, almost like a critical thinking way, right? So that we could just kind of, digest it a little bit better, right? Digest the material a little bit better. But for this classroom, it's about hands-on, right? So for the group thinking, what I'm trying to do is develop a concept of why we group think, when it's okay to group think, but then how do we develop our way out of it? Which is the same thing that I'm doing with you. How do we develop our way out of it? The group think for our philosophical classroom. We depend on our individuality. We depend on a good, well-developed sense of self. And that's what we're doing in this classroom. We are getting a well-developed sense of self, all right? So I'm going to talk about universal traits in our philosophical classroom because we're going to be talking about traits that we all have that might get us then to groupthink. We kind of contrast that with our unique traits, right? That help us stand out so we don't go into a groupthink. Now, I know that was probably a little bit more than what this age group is used to digesting or thinking about for our critical thinking classroom. But the idea here is that we here in this classroom are looking for real skills we could develop. In the other classroom, we are talking about these same things, but we're talking about why we need them, right? Why and how we use these skills of developing and learning ourselves in this very dynamic kind of way, right? So developing skills about ourselves as well as understanding the way that the world works, all right? So we're developing skills about ourselves. Later on in our philosophical classroom, we think about those skills relative to how the world actually works, all right? So we're still talking about health and personality in this class, all right? 40 developmental assets are some assets, personality characteristics that you might purposefully want to develop in yourself, okay? So let's go. Now, if you remember where we left off last time was we left off talking about, oh, there's all the slides. not supposed to be giving you right now. We left off talking about the 5 different personality traits, right? So we look at those 5 different personality traits in order for us to be able to say, hey, this works well for most people, extroversion. This doesn't work well for most people, neuroticism, instability. Then we are able to kind of take a look at where you land on the 5 personality traits. Remember, we use the acronym OCEAN, O for openness, C for conscientiousness, E for extroversion. Remember, each of these have an opposite, right? So if you don't score high on extroversion, you're an introvert. If you don't score high on openness, you're closed. If you don't score high on conscientiousness, you tend to be more disorganized. OCEA, agreeableness. If you're not high on agreeableness, you tend to be disagreeable. And neuroticism, right? If you tend to be high on neuroticism, you tend to be low on stability, all right? The opposite of neuroticism would be stable, emotionally stable, consistent in your emotions, consistent in your thinking, okay? All right, so that's where we left off the last time. But what I wanted to do was also then, I gave you that background, but then give you some of this information on personality and health. Okay. So we talked about the personality types. Personality type A, that was the first personality type that we addressed or identified. We contrasted that with personality type B, which was basically everything that's not A. We focused on B. We focused on A. B was everything that wasn't A. Our focus was on A. What is A, right? So key here is when we learn about A, key here is that it's associated with heart disease, and the key element is hostility. B is just a contrast for A, so it's everything that A isn't, that's B. But then we found that some personalities are not anal and outgoing and ambitious, right? That there are people who don't fit that category. And that category really was describing a lot of white-collared, white working men, right? So here we've got personality type C. Personality type C is really repressed. However you want to say that, you explode later on, you're cryful, you're tearful, you're those kinds of things. This is a repressed personality. I don't say what I think. I don't do what I want. I'm just a quiet little mouse in the corner. And that type C, we remember, is the outcome for that. The health outcome for type C is associated with cancer. So you can see how, as researchers, we might do this, right? We might take a look at people who have cancer and then see what types of personality they have. Or we might take a look at personality types and then see if later on they which personality types get cancer. We look at them both ways. Identify personality types, see if they have cancer. Identify people who have cancer, see what personality type they are. All right? Then we talked about type D personality, and the key to type D personality was cynicism, right? Cynicism is a negative outlook on everything and everybody. That is type D personality. And type D personality actually is related to more psychoticism, right? So greater mental illness, greater disturbed behaviors is what we see in type D personality. Greater mental illness. Okay, now we look a lot at surveys, and the surveys are there for quite a few reasons. they are there for fun, for you to look at for fun. They're there for, because lots of people like to figure out what their personalities are and to see if those personality tests actually match what we think, right? If they really do match our personalities. So they're fun. We like to look at personality surveys because they're fun. We like to look at personality surveys because they're informative as well. They tell us not only about ourselves, but they tell us about who we aren't as well, right? And so we may want to improve on certain personality traits in order to what? Be healthier and be happier, right? So, for example, we had the True Grit scale, if you remember. Our True Grit scale all these slides we had and all these scales right there. Finally. So our True Grit scale, that's informative, right? Because we may find out that we actually don't have a lot of grittiness. We may not really be the person to overcome obstacles. But by taking a look at that scale, we can have an idea of how we might develop grittierness, right? By not letting setbacks get me down, by not let me see, I'm looking at the new ideas. I'm working on a project that may take 10 years to finish. By looking at doing and completing long-term projects, by seeing how many new ideas you have to contribute, right? So those scales are fun, they're entertaining, but they really do give us an idea about the kinds of people we are as well. These optimism scales tell us about whether or not we have a tendency to focus on, the glass half full or the glass half empty. This efficacy scale gives us information on control. And so does this, Rotterman's, what is it? It is a control scale, but it's not called a control scale. So here we've got another scale for optimism and pessimism. You didn't call it that either, though. So informing us in many different ways about information, life orientation test. That's an optimism test. And then we might be able to do some predictions on all kinds of things, including our health, right? Including our anxiety that we have, including our personality types. So we've got all kinds of different surveys that I've introduced you to that are fun to do, but can tell us about ourselves, but can also tell us about what we need to do to improve ourselves. Now, this is called an attribution style questionnaire, is what it's called. And in this is another measure, and this is a measure for our attribution style. What does that mean? What is an attribution style? Well, if you remember, here, in this cave technique, when we were determining if we were optimists or pessimists, we were determining whether or not our statements were optimistic and that they were not, bad events were not due to us, or they were pessimistic, bad events were due to us. Bad events were stable or bad events were unstable. Bad events were global or bad events were specific to this situation. So we use this cave technique and we described these 3 different attribution styles. Now, in this slide that I have here on attribution styles, we literally are measuring statements and whether or not those statements are, first of all, do they apply to me? And then we look at those statements for internal versus external statements, stable versus unstable statements, and global versus specific statements. All right? So, and then we also look at statements that are made that are positive statements, good statements, or bad statements. All right, so there we have statements. You tell a joke and everyone laughs. You ask someone to dance and he or she says no. You forget your spouse's boyfriend, your boyfriend, or your girlfriend's birthday. Or you do exceptionally well in a job interview. So those are 4 different events. I have 2 more events described there as well. You get a flower from a secret admirer. You lose a sporting event for which you have been training for a long time. All right. So those are events. And some of those events are good events. They're positive events. You tell a joke and everyone laughs. Some of them are negative events. You ask someone to dance and he or she says no. In parentheses there, I've got a code. And that code ends with a B or a G. That code suggests that that statement is either a good statement, a positive statement, you tell a joke and everyone laughs, or it's a negative statement, a bad, so a B. So G for good, B for bad. You can see there that each one of those statements in parentheses ends with either a B or a G. If it's a positive statement, it's a good statement, it ends with a G. If it's a negative statement, it's a bad statement, it ends with a B. And then you also see that you've got another code there. The codes are PS, PSG or PSB, PM, PMG or PMB. And then, come on, PV, PVG or PVB, right? All right. So you've got those codes, PS, PM, or PV. And we already know what the G or B means, good statement or bad statement, right? Okay, all right. The PS is personal. So that is internal or external. Is it due to me or is it due to something outside of myself? All right. So PS is personal. Is it internal or external? Is personal. Is it due to me or something outside of myself? PM is permanent. Permanent. Does it happen all the time? Permanent is stable or unstable. Okay. Permanent, it's stable. Permanent, it's unstable. And then we have good events. Is the good event stable or unstable? Is the bad event stable or unstable? And then we've got pervasive. And pervasive is it happens in every situation. Okay. So pervasive is no, I'm sorry. Those are the opposite. Those are the opposite. I'm sorry. Permanent is in every situation. Pervasive is stable or unstable. All right. So it's just is or it isn't, stable or unstable. What I want you to look there at is what choice you would make on each one of those statements. So here we've got a personal. It either is because of me or not. And a good statement. You tell a joke and everyone laughs. Is that because the joke was funny? Or is it because your timing was perfect? Now, if you notice there, if you look closely, think about your answer. You tell a joke and everyone laughs. Is it because the joke was funny? Or was it because your timing was perfect? All right, let's just take a look at that for a minute. Because what we're doing here is we are looking at the specific self-talk that we use. And then in that self-talk, how could we change it? Remember, attribution means the cause of some event. So in that first one, when we say, you tell a joke and everyone laughs, is the cause of that because the joke was funny, or is the cause of that because your timing was perfect? Now you only have two options there. You only have two options. That's it. So you have to pick the best answer. It's one of the harder things to do regarding this type of survey. It's attribution style questionnaire, ASQ, right there. The ASQ, the attribution style questionnaire. Why am I going into these questionnaires? Why am I going into them? You begin to hear your self-talk is what this is. You begin to hear your self-talk. And in your self-talk then, you will begin to know, is that self-talk about me or an outside event, internal or external? Is that self-talk stable or unstable? Is it all the time? Right? Pervasive or not? Is it permanent? Is it in every situation all the time? All right. So when we begin to hear our self-talk in very everyday events and in very everyday circumstances, we can begin to change our self-talk. Okay. So there's a good event in the orange square there. You tell a joke and everyone laughs. You can see the joke was funny. That's due to something external to me. It's not due to me, right? When something is good that happens, we want it to be due to me. Like my timing was perfect. I told that joke. Are you a person who knows how to tell a joke? That's what that's asking. Do you think you know how to tell a joke? And if a joke is funny because everyone laughs, is it because you know how to tell a joke? Or is it because the joke was funny? Do you see how that's due to me or due to something outside of myself? I'm a funny person. I'm a funny person. I got control over that joke because I'm a funny person and I know how to tell a joke. Or no, everyone laughed. It wasn't due to me. It was due to the joke. Do you see how our self-talk then reflects what we think of ourselves? In that instance, do you think of yourself as not a funny person, but the joke is funny? Nothing to do with you? So the good event that occurred had nothing to do with you. It was the joke. Now, how do you begin to get control over that and see things differently, that it was due to you? Right? Maybe you're not funny. Maybe telling a funny joke and everyone laughing will never have anything to do with you. But you look for other things. You look for the things that you have control over. Let's look at a few more examples because this gets a little deep and confusing. You ask someone to dance and he or she says no. Is it because you are not a good enough dancer? Due to you. This is personal. Personal bad event here. A bad event is they said no when I asked them to dance. Is it due to me because I'm not a good dancer? Or is it due to something that I can't control outside of me, the bad event, and that he or she doesn't like to dance? There's nothing I can do about it. It's outside of me. How do I explain that bad event? And do you see how these then recognize our ability to control something? Let's look at the next one. You do exceptionally well in a job interview. Is it because, let me read it on this other one. Is it because you felt extremely confident during the interview? This is a good event, right? Or is it because you interview well? Both of them are good events. Both of them are good outcomes, but only one of those outcomes says it happens all the time. It's stable. Do you see how we're getting to the stability or instability? Maybe you don't think you interview well, but you did well in that event. It's unstable, but it's a good event, and you need good events to be stable. You need it to be due to the fact that you interview well. You forgot your spouse's or boyfriend or girlfriend's birthday. Is it because you aren't good at remembering birthdays, or is it because you were preoccupied with other things? You can see here you aren't good at remembering birthdays is something that's permanent. It's stable. It happens all the time. And this is a bad event. So these bad events happen all the time, right? So this is saying I'm a pessimist. And I'm a pessimist. Why? Because I see bad events as being stable. You are preoccupied with other things. This bad event is not stable, it's unstable. The next one, the last one. You get a flower from a secret admirer. You get a flower from a secret admirer. Is that, now this is pervasive in all situations. You are attractive to him or her. That is in all situations. Or you are a popular, or I'm sorry, that's only in that situation. You are attractive to him or her. That's only in that situation. The good event is only for that person. Or did you get a flower from a secret admirer because you're a popular person? That's pervasive. The good event can happen all the time because you're a popular person. You lose a sporting event for which you have been training for a long time, a bad event. Is that bad event pervasive, or is it just specific to this event? You are not a very good athlete. You are not very athletic. That is all the time in every situation, or you aren't good at that sport. That is for that particular situation. So we have got then examples of comments that we make that can show us optimism in a good or bad event, or pessimism in a good or bad event. So why did I take you over that specific survey? Because those are perfect examples of ways we could look at a date, a dance, a getting a job. All of these normal everyday things, we now see how we can perceive them in optimistic ways or in pessimistic ways. If you want that full survey, you can email me and I can get you that full survey. You can email me at Dr. Feravich, F as in Frank, ERA, V as in Victor, ICH, Dr. Feravich, Feravich, at healthymindbodyspirit.net, and I will get you that whole ASQ survey. It's another survey that you can use to measure your optimism and pessimism, but more than that, this gives you scales for self-esteem. This one survey gives you a scale for self-esteem. It gives you a scale for your hope, and it tells you what areas, internal, external, stable, unstable, global, specific, that you really need to work on. So this was developed by Martin Seligman, who we've talked about before as far as self-esteem goes. And he said, I can retrain the way that you think certain events occur. I can retrain your thinking about the cause of the events that happen in your life. Why? Why? Because events happen in my life and bad things happen and I'm going to get you to fake it? No. Because really, a lot of life is perception. Right now, I've been going through a lot of stress, as many people have. And I'm coming here, not getting paid, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not getting paid to do this. How am I keeping that stamina up? Well, I have got to look at what I'm doing and have a perspective about it. What I'm doing is investing in my future is what I'm doing. I could be sad, and I have been sad. I could want to give up, and I have wanted to give up. Not a lot, though, because I really, really do see this as being part of my future. So I'm investing. What am I doing? I'm keeping my skills sharp right now as a teacher. I'm doing research on these topics that I love. That's what I am doing. So I am staying active in these even during difficult times. That's perspective. I certainly have a lot of reason to be depressed, sad, and anxious, just like you probably do. But it all depends on whether or not I'm working towards my future goals or whether or not I'm sitting here giving up. Okay, all right, let's move on. These are how you score the ASQ. So you can see that you are getting now a certain point for that being either optimistic or pessimistic. So that's all that is about. It's just scoring that. Okay, how do people explain their achievements? Now, this again gives you another really good example of the three different types of attributions we make. Stable. The one is locus of control is what we say. So that was also personal or internal, external, right? And then the last one is a feeling of control, or we could call this pervasiveness is what we call that. All right. So we can make stable attributions about us. We have good coordination, or we are poor at math, or unstable. Luck is not stable. Illness is not stable. About personal things I can do. Locus, internal attributions are effort or control. Controlling my effort. Effort, making extra effort. I can do that. Or I have poor skills. That's inside of me. External attributions. That was an easy test. Nothing I can do about having a good grade on it because it was an easy test. Or it was difficult, a difficult contribution, nothing, or a competition. Nothing I could do about it because it was a very difficult competition. Control is how pervasive is it, right? Does it happen all the time? I'm always highly motivated, or I never practice enough. Or things that are uncontrollable, like I'm from a wealthy family. That's good, right? And it will help me in every different event in my life, right? But I didn't have anything to do with that, right? Or the economy. I don't have anything to do with the economy, and that could also hurt me, or have something to do with my luck that I'm having right now, or money that I'm having right now. Look at the chart there on the left-hand side there. So what that is attribution retraining. Now, let me tell you something about attribution retraining. We do attribution retraining in a lot of different ways, but the main way that we do attribution retraining is by getting people to master their skills. Remember, what we said is we want to master skills and then refine those skills over time. So what is attribution retraining? Attribution retraining is this mastering of our skills, right? So believing that we can master skills over time. That is one way to get people to retrain, is to say, I am doing better than I did yesterday, right? So when we have a performance level that's low, we can still master the event. That is attribution retraining. Attribution retraining simply is getting people to understand they can improve. Getting people to think in incremental ways, refining ways, as opposed to getting them to think in ways that are, there we go, in ways that are saying they're fixed. My skills are fixed. No, we don't want, no, we don't want your skills to be fixed. We want your skills to get better over time. That's attribution retraining. How do I get to be more optimistic? Period. How do I get to be more optimistic? I believe I can be trained. I believe I can improve. I believe in a view that is incremental oriented. I can improve in increments. You practice thinking that, and that will be the start of the change of your self-talk, your negative self-talk. Every time you hear yourself say, I'm so stupid, you go back and rechange that to say, I am improving. List what you've learned. List what you have improved on every time you have negative self-talk. That is attribution retraining. So I can never get anything right. Stop yourself. I improved here. I did better at this. I learned this. And that's what you do for attribution retraining. One way is to teach people to master their skills, which means you're just teaching them that they learn something in increments. That is attribution retraining. So let's go back and take a look at that. Attribution retraining can also be that you are focusing specifically on those elements of your self-talk that we saw in that ASQ. So I can, through attribution retraining, focus on your good positive statements and see whether or not those are internal or external, stable, unstable, global, specific. I can look at your negative statements when a bad event happens and then retrain you so that you focus on making internal statements when something good happens, making external statements when something bad happens, making stable statements when something good happens, unstable statements when something bad happens, making global statements when something good happens, making specific statements when something bad happens. So you could get right down, you could train yourself broadly, attribution retraining, you can train yourself broadly. I can master anything in increments. That's a broad training. You could do it yourself. Or you could focus on very specifics of your self-talk here, right? And then retrain yourself on those very specific elements of your pessimistic self-talk. All right? Okay. All right. So let's take a look now at that chart that we have there. We see what we're measuring is GPA for first-year students. So grade point average for first-year students. And we could see that those individuals who had no attribution retraining had lower GPAs. Individuals who had attribution retraining believed that their efforts made a difference. They did not learn helplessness. Those individuals we see grew significantly and improved their GPA. For the bottom third, middle third, and top third, all increased their GPA by a significant amount. So we see that our self-talk and our attribution retraining really can make a difference on how we feel about ourselves, but make a real difference in real improvement. Just an attitude change. That's it. Just an attitude change makes a real difference in, for example, GPA. We see here that personality type here, so an attitude change can actually affect your coronary heart disease. So remember, what was the personality trait that contributed to coronary heart disease? It was hostility, right? So we've got the percentage of subjects who have coronary heart disease or who are healthy. And these are individuals who had type A personality versus type B personality. So we can see those individuals that have got coronary heart disease, more of them have a tendency to be from type A personalities. If you are healthy, more individuals tend to be type B personality when they are healthy. All right. So those were some of the first studies that we did that demonstrated the relationship between personality and heart disease. Okay. Now for this one, I have left some of the information blank to help you sort of recognize where to fill this information in. This is an older study, but this is an older study that looked at blood pressure. So it is really interesting. And how about talking? How much do you talk and get out that information to other people? Remember, we've talked about that with expressiveness. Some people are highly expressive, other individuals are not highly expressive. How about that related to health? What about that? We've looked at it, but now we're talking a little bit more specifically about personality types. So we've got this type A personality, which is high hostility individuals, right? So those are individuals who are on the right, the bar graph on the right. And then you can see that each set of participants, low hostility participants as measured using a personality test versus high hostility participants. And then we can see that they're divided further into talking or not talking. So these are individuals who talk out their issues. Did they talk with somebody else? All right. So our independent variable, our IV, we have two IVs, two grouping variables. One is whether or not they were hostile or not hostile. So we give them a personality quiz, and then we on hostility, and we divide, and we take a look at those people who are in the highest 25% of hostility and the lowest 25% in hostility, and we compare those individuals like we're doing here. We also broke low hostility individuals into whether or not they were talking or not talking. That's whether or not they talked their problems out, right? So we gave them another survey. Are you a person who likes to talk your problems out, or do you keep your problems to yourself? And we divided those participants that were identified as low hostility into talking or not talking, and those high hostility into talking or not talking. And then we see that the dependent variable that we're measuring is, we have the systolic blood pressure. That's your blood pressure. We're looking at your blood pressure. Low hostility participants had low blood pressure, whether or not they talked out their problems or not. But isn't that interesting about high hostility individuals, right? Isn't that interesting all the way over here, that last bar? High hostility individuals that had to talk out their problems had the highest level of blood pressure. So should I talk out my problems? Likely so, but it's not helping individuals when they are extremely hostile. What were the results? The results were that interactions made high hostility individuals more hostile. They had no, this is an element of control, a feeling of control. When I'm talking to another individual, they're irritating me. I find talking to you irritating. Why? Because I can't control what you're saying, because you're saying something stupid that I don't like, right? Or you're saying something that aggravates me, or that irritates me, or that is politically incorrect, or doesn't match my thinking, or whatever it is. And because I'm highly hostile, I don't want to talk to you. And what happens when you're blood pressure goes through the roof. These individuals have to learn to get along with other people. Why? Because they have to interact. And interaction with these individuals who are type A personality ends up being very confrontational, very hostile interaction. So what do? Do we get highly hostile people to not talk to anybody? Or likely the better answer is reduce the hostility so that highly hostile people can talk to other people. Okay. Moving on. Here are the physical consequences to hostility. And then we're going to get into our developmental assets. So just like I said, we end the day with beginning our new topic. Some health consequences of higher anger and hostility: physical illness. High hostility scores predict increased incidence of many illnesses, including asthma, liver disease, and arthritis. So those things that you wouldn't expect to be affected, how can liver disease be affected by anger and hostility? But we can see that when you are hostile and can't talk to anybody because you're angry, physical illness increases. Our immune system decreases. High anger is related to weakness in the immune system, especially after a conflict. A conflict that deflates a man's ego is much more harmful to his health. So deflates his ego. But the man doesn't mind the fight. He only ends up getting physical problems from the fight if it deflates his ego, right? His testosterone level goes down in the fight, or up, right? Or up, right? Because you're challenging him. An argument, just the disagreement. The disagreement is what ends up getting women, or high hostility ends up getting women into the heart attack zone. Okay, so it's a little bit different. There are gender differences for men and women. Let me take a look at that actually, because I talked about that. Yeah, wives are more likely to experience hardening of the arteries when they bring hostility to an argument, and the risk rises further when a partner is hostile too. Husbands' arteries don't harden with hostility, but rather with issues of dominance, which has to do with their levels of testosterone, right? Okay, all right. So, gender differences in the way that we experience hostility, with hostile women experiencing greater weaknesses in their immune system. Dominance issues, you're dominating me, that will affect the male immune system and physical health. Pain, high anger scores are associated with lower pain tolerance in lab studies and with complaints of greater pain among patients experiencing pain. So when people are angry, they have seen it both in their pain tolerance, but also in their scores of how much pain are you experiencing on a scale of 1 to 10. Cholesterol, high trait anger is correlated with high cholesterol levels. What's trait anger? It's stable anger. It's not that you get angry in situations, but you're angry all the time. Higher levels of cholesterol. Cardiovascular disease, high hostility is related to high incidence of many cardiovascular diseases, including arteriosclerosis and coronary artery blockage. So, heart attacks and plaque buildup in the arteries. And then finally, death. High scores on measures of anger and hostility are associated with death from cardiovascular disease, as well as death from other causes that we see, like, for example, possibly asthma. We know that when we are stressed, that individuals experience greater symptoms, asthma symptoms. In particular, we have seen this in children. So mothers who are overprotective of their asthma child has about 30% higher rate of incidence of asthma attacks in the presence of their mother than outside the presence of their mother. So we see all of these variables affecting our health, which has a lot to do with our perceptions. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. You are in the critical thinking classroom with the critical thinking teacher, Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me. We will be here tomorrow, and we will be getting into those developmental assets. Let me show you them, because I always tell you I'd give you that at the end, and we said nothing about those developmental assets. Here are some external assets that we can develop, and if we have, and then here are some internal assets. And this is just an accumulation of assets is what you're doing. So you're looking at the list of assets. There's 144 assets. Do I have them or don't I? And then we'll see what the outcomes are if you do or don't. On tomorrow's classroom, thanks for joining me, Dr. Annette Feravich, the teacher. Thanks.